After learning from so many professors over the last year, we thought it would be valuable to share some voices from our students and alumni about how they understood the text and the course syllabus and their encounters with it, and how they experienced the seminar style classes, which is so new for so many of them. To prepare for this touchstone, I recorded interviews with 9 of our alumni at the Yale and Columbia programs. They had a lot to say, so I'm going to keep my remarks short and really let them do most of the talking. 3 of our alumni are with us today, Shekbal, Alba Bayri, and Henry Sayu, so please think of questions you would like them to answer at the end of this presentation. So to set us up, the first thing I asked our students was to pick a text that mattered to them and teach us a little how they understood it and what it meant to them. Here I noticed 3 broad themes: readings on education, readings on self and identity, and readings on citizenship, politics, and society. Not surprisingly, students have a lot to say about education and a lot of opinions. And so here are some of the texts that they mentioned when they talked about education. I'll just note that Martha Nussbaum's Not-for-Profit was part of an F&C orientation reading, and Paulo Freire's Pedagogy of the Oppressed was actually a text just for an alumni pilot program that we ran last summer, but it was a huge hit among those students. So for today, we're going to feature some students talking about the trial and death of Socrates and Baldwin's A Talk to Teachers. So without further ado, here they are.
This is from the Apology. So I withdrew and thought to myself, I am wiser than this man. It is likely that neither of us knows anything worthwhile, but he thinks he knows something when he does not. Whereas when I do not know, neither do I think I know. So I am likely to be wiser than he to the small extent that I do not think I know what I do not know. And this quote was meaningful at first when I read it because it kind of revealed the character of Socrates and how humble he was, even though there were so many people kind of following him and claiming him as this paragon of a philosopher. But now that I look back to it, I kind of relate to it on a more personal level because I find that the more I learn, the more I read, the more there is to know, and the more I find that I do not know much. So I think it's important to remember that no matter where you are in the process of learning or becoming a better student, you always have much more to learn.
And Alba is with us today. Here is another student.
It's natural for us to associate like wisdom or intellect or knowledge with learning. So him saying he knows or he's the wisest in the room because he knows nothing or like he knows what he doesn't know, it's kind of like, it seems like a joke at first, but it really makes sense because there's a lot of stuff we don't know as human beings. Nobody ever wants to admit that they don't know. So like admitting or like being able to admit that you don't know everything is such a, like, it really takes like a level of humility to do that I think not everybody can do. It takes like also like a level of maturity that not everybody has.
And so Alba and Mosu for speaking about the Apology, which we read in the second day of our program. And now we'll hear from 2 students on Baldwin's Talk to Teachers, which is the last day of the F&C syllabus.
With James Baldwin's text on education, he put so much emphasis on the way we should educate, the way teachers should educate. That is really important. You know, there are a lot of stuff we're ignoring. It's all about teaching the kids, teaching us today about finance, about econ, and about a lot of stuff, how we make money, but not what's the best way of living life.
And Sheikh is here with us today.
You know, sitting in a class, like they want you to be in a certain structure. They want, for example, writing to be in a certain structure. They want you to use this and that in a certain way. I mean, there's no room to really discover who you really are, your individualism. almost, right? And that's kind of, and I guess like I'm kind of like contradicting what I said earlier about like how you learn a lot in school, but in reality, school can also like undermine that and just make you almost feel like a robot and be what society wants you to be and everything. And
So above all, education as a theme is an incredible introduction to philosophy. In F&C, we use education texts in our orientation. Sometimes we'll have students stage mock debates trying to convince their TAs to major in the STEM or liberal arts fields. We'll use text to have them design their own school systems based on their philosophy of education. And I'll often use themes of education when pitching the program to students and recruiting students in the winter. The next major theme to emerge was self-discovery and identity formation. And here two texts really stood out, and that was Plato's Allegory of the Cave and Du Bois's Souls of Black Folk. So we're going to hear now from 3 alumni.
A text that mattered to me in FNC was the Allegory Cave. The reason why that text mattered to me because it demonstrated how in basically how in society you can't like really like be a kid anymore, like being like living your own surreal fantasy. You have to like step into a real world and deal with real problems. That mattered to me because it's how like me going to college, how this like college life works instead of me like being in my parents' home, like shelter and stuff.
So Callie did what a lot of students do, take a text that's ostensibly about one thing and turned it into something else. So this text that we often think about as education, he's thinking about his own relationship with his parents and his family. And that is a theme that definitely rising seniors in high school have a lot to say about. And now 2 students on Du Bois.
Souls of Black Folk by Du Bois. I'd never read Du Bois before. Well, most of the texts and authors I'd never read before, but it was really particularly interesting because he talks about contrasting ideas, sort of being both Black and American and seeing those ideas as contrasting. And so it made me reflect a lot on my own identities and how sometimes I feel those contrasting. I was born in the Dominican Republic. And so growing up in New York City was like, I would reject the fact that I was American, but I sort of had to sit down and reflect and admit the fact that I've been in the United States long enough that I'm sort of assimilated and I can say that I'm American to some extent, but I'm also Dominican, and there's sort of some sense of that culture and identity that I've lost because I didn't fully grow up in the Dominican Republic. And so it was a really important text for me to sit down with and reflect on that identity.
And our next student is also with us here today, Henry.
The one that I found to have carried the most impact in my life post CTW would be Du Bois's The Souls of Black Folk. Now that text was very influential to me personally because when I first interacted with it, I definitely was hostile to Du Bois and a lot of the assertions that he made within that text. To name a few, I think obviously like the book's thesis is essentially that there's a veil separating Blackness or the Black world and the white world, and that for one to come into themselves or come into being accepted in society, they have to like transcend that veil or something along those lines. And that was a concept that I was very hostile to at first and kind of like pushed back on, as I kind of interacted with it more. But I found that in my life post CTW, I found myself revisiting that idea of this veil and thinking that, at the time when I read it, I thought that it was completely hooey because I thought that personally through my prowesses that I had transcended this veil that Du Bois was talking about. But post CTW, I've kind of revisited this idea of a veil separating the Black world and the white world, and this idea of Black artisanship. I revisited it and kind of started to see ways in which the concept of that veil and the various other things that Du Bois was talking about does kind of apply to my life. It doesn't, hasn't all the way transformed my mindset in the sense where I agree with him, but I definitely do think that reading kind of now informs a little bit of my perspective more so than it did when I first interacted with it.
So here we had Azadi, who seamlessly adapts it to her own life and her own experience, and Henry, who really struggles with Du Bois and the meaning of the text for his life. And this is pretty common. Both of these experiences are really common. And I think that's probably why Du Bois was considered an essential text by so many of the students I spoke with. A third theme brought up questions about society, citizenship, students' place in the world. Many of the students did mention Hobbes here, but we're going to focus on Aristotle, Dewey, and King for these video clips.
Aristotle states, "It is also clear why a human being is more of a political animal than bees or any gregarious animals. Nature makes nothing pointlessly, as we say, and no animal has speech except a human being." So I feel like the fact that we as humans are the only one who can like physically like speak what's on our mind is just like really crazy. And he was saying in his writing how like because we have that one single like difference, it that's what like shaped and framed our society. And so it just made me realize how important like our voices are, like when you talk and stuff, like when you talk what's on your mind, like you're spreading ideas throughout the world, and those ideas like actually like hold like weight and value to it, because then like you never know what you can say that can influence someone else.
Dylan and I pulled up his old response paper on Aristotle, and he had actually argued almost the opposite, that voice destroyed humanity and robbed us of utopia. And so when I pointed that out to him, he said, well, now I'm a lot more responsible. I'm a lot older now, and I think about my voice and how to use it for good. So we do see a lot of ways students changing over time their interpretations of the text.
One of the readings that stood out to me was Intelligence in the Modern World by John Dewey. He said, the way he put it was that the task of liberalism is to mediate like social transitions. So like depending on the time, depending on like the point in history that you're like addressing, you can look at what the conflict was at the time and see what people want, like what people were living at the time and what they wanted to go towards. And that like transition is what you would like apply the concept of like liberalism to. I never thought like liberalism was something that could be like used as a tool or like explained in a way where it felt like it's this like tool that like is used to like for a movement or like a transition from one thing to another, not to like steal his words. I always thought about it like, oh, the opposite of like conservatism.
So taking this word that had almost no meaning to Massouf and really opening his world, his idea about what that one word liberalism means for him.
Aristotle states,
One of the readers.
Yeah, in the second text, I think I interacted with this one a little bit differently. The second text for me was letter from Birmingham jail, Martin Luther King. Now, this was a text when I first interacted with it. I was astounded because King presented the idea of nonviolent activism and getting arrested in social disobedience as something in a way that I never really considered it before. Right? He considered it that he presented it as if it was something that was positive, that was like a positive aspect of good citizenship. Because when he was responding to these, ministers and these members of the church, he kind of framed it as if, by him being arrested and allowing the law to do what it was supposed to do, which was obviously like punish him for his transgressions, he framed it as if that was him being a good citizen. And when I first interacted with it, I was like, wow, that's a really fascinating way to look at this. I actually never thought about it like this. And I kind of agreed with him. I was like, maybe he is being a good citizen. But I think my freshman year of college, we re-interacted with Letter from Birmingham Jail in one of my English classes. And I don't know what had happened within me, but when I looked at it, I was like, this is complete nonsense. I read it and I was like, this is like the most paradoxical argument I've ever heard. But I had heard it like not like less than 2 summers prior, and I was taken away by it. So I think there's an interesting little paradigm at play here with how I transformed after interacting with Du Bois versus after I interacted with Letter from Birmingham Jail.
And again, Henry is here, so I'll let you guys ask him questions about that shift for both texts for him. So many texts to choose from. I asked students if they had any advice for all of you selecting text for your syllabi. So here are some of their thoughts.
I think it's important to have these kinds of shocking texts, and not only texts that we would most likely agree with, because they kind of reveal to us how Western thought has developed over time, and how there are things that we should not like about the ancients, and how we should not take their words for what they are, but we should take them apart, critique them, and use them to analyze where we are today.
And again, Alba is here.
For professors, the text they should put on the syllabus is like basically like a text that like that's unique to them, like that found like that's like impactful to like in a way not change their lives, but like having like effect in their lives, like a moment which like they never felt, and then they can like relate to it, and then they can like read to like not only to themselves but like to the world and everybody like around them. So like not only specifically then not individually but like overall society based.
If you're gonna choose a text, like I think something that the text I think should be so good to the point where there's gonna be so many arguments and so many just like people saying that this is so, I disagree with this or I agree with this. And texts that are obviously not easy, because some of the texts that I think read at FSC, they were definitely challenging, but I feel like if you're challenged, then you grow more and everything. And
You know, we were young coming into FNC, but that didn't mean we didn't know anything. Yeah, we did know some things, you know, whether that's something we learned or something from our culture. We were coming with, even though it was a little bit, we were coming with some experience. I think it would be so amazing if professors who were to just, you know, have that surveys or, you know, asking the students, or at least asking past students. I think that would be great, of their experience, and then designing the text based on students' shared experience. And then once in a while, you know, including a text that, you know, question everything that they believe in. Because that's the way, because for me, I really hate discussions where, you know, everybody's like, oh, I agree with this, I agree with that. That doesn't take us anywhere. You know, we need someone who disagrees. We need that devil's advocate to, you know, get the discussion going. You know, challenge people. You know,
So Sheikh is here with us, and something he and other students talked about, in addition to asking you to find texts that are shocking and profound and challenging and destabilizing, they also talked about diversity of their texts. And there are a lot of opinions on this point, of course, and they don't really lend themselves easily to sound bites. But I will say that when students spoke about diversity, they primarily spoke about diversity of viewpoints and perspectives and ideas, the way that Sheikh just did, rather than necessarily the race or gender of the writers. Some students really definitely wanted to see themselves represented by the authors in the texts, and some students thought the classroom should be the focus of that diversity. Others wanted to really think about themes that were relevant to them rather than people. I will say that across the board, and I think you can see this from these 4 students, they want to debate, they want to argue with each other, with their professors, with the texts. So that's really what gets them excited. They also had some advice for you all in how to teach their texts. So I'm going to let them all kind of bombard you with their opinions and advice.
He'd always go around the table and ask, oh, how was your weekend? What'd you do over the weekend? And like, he'd remember so like small details about what you told him, about what you were passionate about. Like I told him like I like soccer, and soccer games were on the weekend. So he would ask me, and he would like, I guess he like Google the score and be like, oh, I saw like Chelsea won last week. And I'm like, oh yeah, they did. And like talk about stuff like that. Like they care more. It's more than just like a program where they're like just there to teach you, because we have like school for that. So it's like being able to like interact with the person.
In FNC, like the big difference that I enjoyed from like my classroom to like FNC, the program, was that all the students get to communicate how they feel, and like Miss Tweel didn't like push back or like say like no. She let it happen. She like sometimes redirects your words and to make a point, but she wouldn't like just throw out the window. And also like she pushed you a lot in class. Like she asked like questions that really made you think. So like even when you thought you knew the book for a second, and then she asked you another question, like it was like, wow, there's like so many different ways to think about.
When you think of a professor, you kind of think of the professor lecturing at you, whereas at FNC is very different. It's more of a conversation, and the professor is there to clarify things or pose questions, but not there to lecture you for 50 minutes. And I think that's really important because it's more student-led rather than professor-led. I think that's in the spirit of FNC.
I think it really should be a discussion amongst students. I think that he limited his commentary to pretty much just clarifying things. And, he spoke so infrequently that we were learning from one another, like, so I think that's probably the best way to go about it.
You're putting yourself at the table surrounded by these thinkers, and you are actually a thinker yourself, because you not only read, because you're reading them, but you're not only reading them, you're critiquing them, you're interpreting what they're saying, and you're using your own personal history and your personal experience.
So the message is somewhat clear. Professors stop talking, yet somehow also ask deeply provocative questions that change everything the students know about themselves. If you think that's a tall order, I think the students have a lot of faith in their professors, and we saw students here talking about 4 different professors, both at Yale and Columbia, and really having that feeling like they're part of a conversation across the board. Before I turn things over to questions for those 3 alumni, Alba, Sheikh, and Henry, I want to share that we have an alumni opportunity that will be advertised this spring. It'll be advertised before our next Touchstone, so I want to make sure you're all aware of it. Those of you who will have alumni as of this spring, I hope you'll help us advertise this. Students will get a $1,000 stipend to meet about 10 times one-on-one with a writing mentor over the summer, reading some of the same transformative texts that we read in our syllabi, but hopefully different. And they'll write a paper about it. So let me close by just allowing Izadi and Henry to share what the fellowship meant to them.
So my paper for that was on Tocqueville's Democracy in America and Thoreau's Walden. I had sort of knew that I wanted to do Walden because I thought it would be a nice sort of experience to be able to sit down and reflect. I think Walden is a text that very much prompts self-reflection, and I really wanted to have that before starting something as big as college. So I really wanted to sort of know myself and my values before starting college. And I thought, reading Walden was a great way to do that. And for me, it was really valuable to have that writing experience before I started college, just because I had not been doing much writing. Like, I was just coming out of a totally virtual senior year of high school. And so most of the writing assignments I was given were not as rigorous as I would have wanted them to be. And my last rigorous writing experience before that was FNC the year prior. And so it was really important for me to sort of flex that writing muscle before going into college, where I would also have another intensive writing experience.
And here's Henry.
That experience also came at like a very pivotal time in my life. It came during the summer where like racial tensions and tensions in America in general were like really at a fever pitch. And I was just, kind of like sitting here. This was like one of those, this was like when COVID had just, came about also. So I was just sitting here all summer. I had an internship that had just got canceled. So I'm sitting here at home, had nothing really to do. And here comes along Stephanie, and she's like, hey, Henry, you should be a Teagle Fellow. I'm like, oh, great. This is the opportunity I'm looking for, right? So I have all these like thoughts that are going through my head about the world around me. I was feeling kind of like unmotivated at the time, if I'm being real, to like really write things down for myself, because that's something that I kind of used to do frequently. I wouldn't call it journaling, but I would just kind of call it reflecting, I guess, about the world. But when I was presented with the opportunity to partake in the Teagle Fellowship, it gave me like a chance and a reason to really sit down and unpack what was really going on in America at the time. And after scouring the media, talking to my family and, the different things that people thought were relevant. I ended up settling on writing about this conversation that was happening about the time about symbolisms about white supremacist and racist symbolisms in America, particularly like in the statutes and various monuments that are spread out around the country. So I ended up trying to unpack that a little bit. But I think the opportunity that presented to me was monumental because it gave me a reason to like turn my brain back on after it being off for so long.
So I really hope you'll help us advertise the Teagle Humanities Fellowship when that call comes out. So now I'd like to open things up to questions. We have our 3 alumni here to expand on some of the things you heard them say in the video. So I'm going to stop sharing and look at all of your faces. Maybe we could start by our alumni. You can each just introduce yourself again so we can put a video to a name. So Henry, why don't you get us started?
Yeah, hey everybody, I'm Henry, and I attend the University of Connecticut, and I'm glad to be taking part in this opportunity right now.
Thank you. And Alba, why don't you go next?
Hi, I'm Alba. I'm a first year at Princeton, prospective politics major. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. And Sheikh?
Hi, everyone. My name is Sheikh. I am a junior at Columbia University, studying economics. Happy to be here. Glad to see you all.
Thank you. And it looks like we've got our first question from Susan.
Hi, I first of all just want to say that your sort of presentations were just unbelievably eloquent, and it's just amazing how articulate you all are. And as I wrote in the chat, that seems to me you should be teaching these courses as opposed to being students in them. But one of the things I'm really interested in, I mean, our big hope with this program is that you will, go on to take humanities courses. I mean, I've already gotten or heard that one of you is a political science major, but I'm just wondering what the follow through for you has been. Do you find yourself gravitating to courses in classics or English or humanities disciplines? How has that worked out for you? And is there any way that you can identify a kind of train of motivation, from classes which sound like they really were wonderful and you got, tremendous amount out of them, but it's that translation into real impact once you get to school. So if you could speak to that, I'd really love that. Thank you.
Is there one of our alumni who would like to start there? Alba, thanks.
Yeah, after FNC, my main focus has been on humanities and social sciences. Like I have to take 3 required science classes and I'm not looking forward to them. FNC kind of pushed me to take a humanities sequence here at Princeton, which is across 2 semesters. It's very interdisciplinary. There's religion, philosophy, history, classics, and literature, which is kind of a broader syllabus than FNC because it covers from antiquity to 20th century texts. But that has been a great experience. And I think part of the reason that I'm taking it is because of the texts that we read in FNC. I'm now having the opportunity to read some of these texts in full because in FNC we read them only excerpts. And it has been great so far. And I plan on continuing to take humanities classes.
Thanks, Alba.
For me, I never really, consider myself as a literature person. I always thought I like more into math, but nevertheless, I was always interested in, learning in philosophy and learning, these thinkers, learning about these thinkers. I think a lot of the texts that we read in FNC, I actually read them in full when I got into Columbia in some of our classes, like contemporary civilizations, for example, where we read a lot of the the Aristotle's, the Hobbes, and all of them. And something that you find that I realized, while going through those texts in full and in those classes is the progression from my initial point of view about these texts to where I was while taking the class. It was a clearly a jump, a major jump in the way I was thinking, the way I was approaching. It was very satisfying. You read this text and you think you don't know about, you don't really understand them, yet you write about them and you read it over and you realize, oh wow, actually, this is making sense. I actually understand this a little bit. And from there on, you become more interested, right? And you want to challenge yourself more in taking other texts and other classes that also introduce intersections, such as a class, for example, like religion and the history of hip hop, where you read texts about religion, connect them to hip hop, something I honestly never thought would be possible to connect those two. It was really interesting. So you see how the start with FNC is always, the influence of FNC is still there as you progress towards my college career.
Yeah, and for me personally, I don't think my program necessarily like reshaped the path that I was on academically, because going into it, I think I was pretty much like had made up my mind that I was going to, be a political science major. I forgot to mention that earlier, by the way. I'm a political science major, but I think what the impact that I do see is it definitely, reshaped or kind of like recalibrated the sort of literature that I gravitate towards. And what I mean by that is because I recall in my freshman year, I found myself gravitating towards things or classes or literature that was more so on the controversial side or that presented conflicting ideas. Like one of the more stimulating classes that I took my freshman year in college was comparative religions. Now, of course, religion is kind of like one of the hottest, most controversial issues you could discuss with a person because everybody has very passionate beliefs about it. So that class was very interesting. And then I found out when I came to the University of Connecticut, I ended up gravitating towards classes that either were like explicitly controversial in nature, or if they weren't, like, for example, I took a freshman intro English class, I would find a way to make it controversial. And in particular with that English class that I'm talking about, I remember we had this one assignment where we had to like create a presentation. The presentation I found to be pretty, dull, but in the course of me like doing the research to, create that presentation, I came across the work of Pablo Freire, his work on the pedagogy of the oppressed. And within that was the concept of the banking education and all of that sort of stuff. So I found that to be something that was like a very new idea to me, but it also kind of like pushed against like other ideas that I also already had. And within that scheme of me gravitating towards controversy or things that are kind of like controversial, I told myself that I wasn't going to leave college without taking critical race theory or Arab-Israeli conflict. And those are, again, what's going on in the Middle East, very controversial, very, compelling ideas or competing ideas about that. And obviously critical race theory, very hot button issue. And it's been so for like a few summers now. So I think that's the one way that my program kind of like influenced my academic pathway.
Thank you all. And Seneca, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you. I really enjoyed hearing all of you reflect. And Henry has already, I think, begun to answer my question to you. I'm a little curious about in what ways have your experiences with this program kind of shaped your conversations with maybe friends, family, or in other classes outside of the typical realm of the humanities?
Somebody want to start on that one? I guess while you all are thinking, I'll mention that the alumni pilot program that we're still working through is going to have students create their own reading list, and they go to their own colleges and start reading clubs on their own syllabi. So some of the students you heard in the presentation were part of that this year, and so suddenly they have like 20 kids eating pizza and talking about the Constitution or Du Bois or Freire or something like that. It was shocking to me how well they were able to do that, but I guess not shocking to the students. Alvo, did you have a hand up?
Yeah, I think that before FNC, I kind of gravitated towards agreeing, like if you mentioned Aristotle or Plato, everybody would say, oh, that's a big name. I should probably agree with what this person is saying. But after FNC, and after taking courses here at Princeton, I am more text oriented, I would say. And I don't, I'm not afraid to critique the ideas of these big philosophers. And I've seen myself, even in conversations with my peers, really questioning the texts and trying to see how the texts influence where we are today, kind of seeing the thread of thought and not just agreeing with everything that's on paper, and not being afraid to raise your own questions and express your own ideas.
Alba, you told me that you were the lone Socrates supporter in your freshman class.
Yeah, we were discussing the Republic in Precepts, which is a small group discussion, and everybody was against Plato because he seemed very tyrannical. And I was supporting Plato, and my professor said that you're the Plato's lawyer in a sense. I was like, well, he saw Socrates, like what happened to him because of democracy. So let's just not undermine what he says.
Very cool, bringing your FNC reading. Shaker Henry, do you want to answer how you change how you talk to your family or friends about anything?
I think totally agree with everything Alba mentioned. But for me specifically, I moved to the States in 2012, right? And throughout high school, I didn't really gain much exposure about how I would approach conversation about democracy, about the Constitution, the ways citizenship works and stuff like that. It's mostly the factual information that you learn from school, but not really any of the philosophical thinking about it. So going to FNC, even though it was the excerpts that we read, however small, it kind of opened my mind. It kind of gave me an opportunity to have conversation about things such as democracy or citizenship on a deeper level, on a greater level, whereby relying, sampling some stuff from whether that's Plato or Socrates and stuff. And even when I came to Columbia in some of my classes, even before we started reading those texts in full, I already had some basic foundations for it. On multiple occasions, I found myself, relaying back what I've learned and how we approach discussions, like because the FNC, the way we approach discussion was it was a college class. I was a high school student basically taking a college course. So that right there, the experience right there, and the knowledge you learn from that month of experience, it kind of gives you a boost for when you're ready to have a conversation and open your mind.
Thank you. We have a question, SK Patterson.
Hi, thank you all so much for your presentations. This is really wonderful to hear everything you have to say. I'm curious about what you did in the way of writing and what is most helpful in that respect. What do you find most interesting and engaging in terms of your written work, especially during the program?
Oh yeah, I can start for that one. For me, I think what my program did was really kind of like introduce me to what it's like to write at a college level. And if I'm being honest, I came into my program kind of on like this high horse. Like, I thought I thought that my pen was like invincible. I thought that, I have like all the, tools to deconstruct any work of literature or whatever the case may be. But I came into the program and I got a rude awakening from like my first couple of responses to the text that we wrote. All right. Because we have like college professors critiquing our work now, which is a lot different than our high school teachers. And for me, what helped me as a writer was actually the TAs in the program. And one TA in particular that I'd be remiss to not like mention him when this conversation comes about, was a TA named Daniel Judd. And every time we would, you know, be constructing our responses to whatever piece of literature we were interacting with at the time, we would write these, or I would write these, you know, like responses that I thought were perfect. And then he'd come back and he'd read it and he'd ask me like, so what? Right. And I'd be offended by that question. And he'd ask me that frequently about like various things that I'm trying to say, or various pieces of, I guess, what I thought was analysis. But after a while, I learned to not be offended by the question, because I recognized that really what he was asking me with the so what question was he was asking me to give in-depth analysis, right? It's not enough to just say that Socrates went to jail and Socrates, you know, thought he was being a good person, but what are my thoughts about it? What are the real world implications of that? Like, what is the analysis of what's going on? And I think that when it comes to college writing, especially in the humanities, analysis is like the, you know, that's like the whole crux of what you're supposed to do. So I think that that experience right there is what was really one of the standout moments for me for my program.
Do either of you want to add to that, Alba? Go ahead.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I just wanted to add on that the prompts, because the professor would usually give us prompts for each reading that we would do. And the ones that I found the most interesting were the ones that would ask us to connect the texts to each other, especially when we had 2 or 3 readings for one day and we had to compare and contrast the author's ideas. I found that to be really helpful in terms of learning how to analyze texts and put the authors in conversation with each other. And I also appreciated when we had open prompts, so we would choose ourselves what interested the most about the text and we would write about that.
Thanks.
Just to add on, I don't know about Alba or Henry, but for me, coming to FNC, I was so deeply into the 5-paragraph format. You know, that is like if I'm writing an essay or whatever response, if it's not in 5 paragraphs, it's not good enough. But it was a good awakening, a realization to know, to have that freedom to write how you want it to have. It's like a free flowing ideas. Your ideas were flowing naturally, because you weren't really, something I appreciate was that you weren't really restricted into how you were supposed to write. You know, the professors just wanted to hear your thoughts on these thinkers, whether that was critiquing them, agreeing with them, or whatever, however it was. That was such a good experience for me, and it's something that I really appreciated from the program.
I think we have time for one last question. Henry, I know you might have to run out. So if you do have to go, that's fine. Thank you so much for being here. But I think, John, if you can ask your question before we transition to our next thing. You're muted.
John, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Really appreciate your being with us today and hearing from you. It's really, really quite wonderful. I'm wondering how the experience has either shaped your perspectives or your participation in public life.
That's a big one for students still in college. But
no, definitely. But I also think that you know, students are also. I guess it's a question of has it impacted you? Because students are certainly active as citizens, you know, middle school, et cetera, et cetera. So just wanted to see if that has an impact on your own thinking or doing.
Yeah, I guess I could say one thing it certainly did was kind of like reinforce my ideas of citizenship, I guess. Because like I said, you know, in my little snippet, I came into the program, I interacted with King and his notions of what it meant to be a good citizen. I kind of absorbed them and kind of like identified with them for a little bit. And then I re-interacted with, you know, King again in college and kind of reverted back to what my initial idea of being a good citizen was. So I think what the program did for me was kind of like, it didn't necessarily change, it briefly changed my notions of what it meant to be a good citizen. But after further reflection, it kind of like ultimately helped to reinforce my notions of what it meant to be a good citizen, and not only reinforce it, but give me the tools to defend that notion, I guess I'd say.
go ahead, Alba.
I think it made me much more attuned to what was happening around me. Like before FNC, I would just read the news and say, okay, that is happening. But then afterwards, it it became much more interesting. For example, I would read about protests or and I would connect it to Hobbes's theory on sovereignty. And it would be much more interesting to see that playing in the real world. And then we had, not during the summer program, but during our civic meetings during the school year, I remember in the beginning we had this kind of workshop kind of to detect which news is not the most credible and which is, and that was really helpful as well. And we also had a lot of exercises on how to become a more active citizen, voting, reaching out to communities, and then our final project really kind of prepares you to be more active in society in terms of civic action.
Go ahead, Sheikh.
I think for me, it helped me not only become a better citizen, but more of like a global citizen, really. And I think like some of the texts we read about democracy and other forms of government or the constitutions, everything like that, it kind of challenges you to go out on your own way and look at the state you're living in, compare it to other states, see any progress we've made. Are we really progressing in a good direction, or in direction that some of these thinkers would want us to progress towards to? And also, in addition to that, you become more aware of your community. It kind of forces you to go out there. Or personally for me, go out there, whether that's volunteering certain things such as community impact, or just doing the least to again become more of that global citizen, whether that's reading the news more, or becoming more interactive, going out for protests or whatever. It was just more of a really good first step towards becoming that global citizen.
Thank you so much to our alumni for joining us, for being part of the video presentation, and then coming back to speak to all of our professors directly. I can't thank you all enough.